Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 203, which is called Surprise Attack. So this episode of the anime adapted pretty much all of chapter 36 of the manga, and actually a little bit of the start of 37, for an episode that wasn't like super action heavy. It was interesting to see it actually cover so much ground from the manga. What it means that it's done is that it's got like all of the setup work out of the way, so we can jump in next episode and pretty much just have sort of the fight episode, which obviously is in a way what everyone waits for in the Boruto anime, is these big episodes where they put a lot of their time and effort in animation into making as good as possible. And based on the preview, it definitely looks like, we're going to see, Naruto and Sasuke go all out, which is what happens in the manga, but it looks like they're giving it pretty good animation treatment. We'll see just how far they go in that. Like, is this going to be reminiscent of sort of the stuff that they did for, like, the Momoshiki fight earlier on in the series, or even the Kawaki fight from, like, his introduction? We'll see if they go that far, but it is noticeable that this episode, like, looked okay, but it wasn't anything particularly fancy. Even though it was, important content, it was clear that they were aware that the stuff that they need to devote the animation towards happens next week. This is most of the setup work. Now, there's a few differences from the manga here. Most of it's relatively subtle. There's one more noticeable thing that they did leave out, which I will get to talking about here, just because it is a whole, like, idea plot thread that they seemingly brought up and have now sort of abandoned. Now, admittedly, they seemingly abandoned it in the manga as well, and it looks like the anime is just committing to that. But otherwise, this episode, what it focuses on is really clear. It's Jigen said he was going to go to see the two karma mark holders, and that's exactly what he does. Now, when he arrives, of course, he arrives at the house, and it's only sort of Kawaki and Naruto there. Boruto's off training, but he's on his way to the scene. But interestingly, he misses out because Jigen, at the end of the episode, transports himself and Naruto to a different dimension, and then Sasuke, who's already in a different dimension, like, teleports to that location. So Boruto doesn't get to see Jigen in this episode. And that was sort of, in a way, like a major thing that Jigen wanted to accomplish in coming to the village, was to witness this other karma mark user that relates to Momoshiki. So that could have been really interesting, but he misses out on that. But the core of this is ultimately that he came to the village because he wanted to take back, the vessel, Kawaki. And in this episode, we get the idea that, we know that Kawaki has his karma mark because of Jigen. So obviously their karma mark is effectively the same. That mysterious Otsutsuki they showed us from the previous episode, the visuals of that Otsutsuki come through for both Jigen and Kawaki. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic there as well. Again, before we've got a lot of the explanation for it, like, what are we thinking about at just this stage of the story? But either way, it's highlighting the idea of the karma mark and the progression of the karma mark. This is how it works. You have a marking on your hand, and then it evolves into sort of like a tattoo all the way up your arm, across your eye. With Jigen, we see that it's sort of like almost like a full body thing across his eyes and so on. And then with Kawaki in this episode, we saw that it extends beyond that and actually has the horn come out as well for Kawaki. So, it presents a few ideas of just like, is that going to happen to Boruto? Those type of things. So, a lot of just cool visuals in this episode as we went through it, of just like seeing that happen. And in many ways, that was the focus of this episode. Yes, we're going to have a fight, but most of it wasn't really in this episode. The main plot takeaway, I think, from this episode is more of just Kawaki is in a scene where Naruto is there, Jigen is there, the two sort of father figures in his life, and he's finally able to, I suppose, communicate his true feelings about this. Of like, he's able to more or less stand up to Jigen and be like, I don't consider you my father at all, and directly say to him, I hate this karma mark, tell me how to get rid of it, which is the last thing Jigen wants. Versus Naruto, who at the start of the episode does sort of like jokingly say that, like, you know, it's like I have another strict son. So it's just this kind of subtle allusion to like Naruto considering Kawaki his son. And at the start of the episode, Kawaki says, you know, kind of under his breath, Naruto doesn't really react to it, but like, I'm not your son. And he says the exact same thing to Jigen, but much more vocally and kind of clear that he really feels it, where it's more of a kind of, with Naruto, like, I'd like to feel worthy enough to be your son, but I'm not kind of feeling it just yet. But here we see Naruto standing up for him. We see Kawaki trying to make sure Naruto doesn't get hurt. And it's just an amazing demonstration of Jigen's powers. Just, again, the sort of chakra absorbing rods, and the fact that he's just able to make them sort of like appear within people. And it's pretty brutal. Like the random the random Jonin guy, or the guard, just gets absolutely skewered. Like Naruto and Konohamaru also get skewered. And it's interesting to see that idea of like, Naruto, okay, he can heal it off, but like Konohamaru and the other guy have like holes in their legs and stuff like that now because of this. That's not an easy thing to recover from. So that's pretty brutal. They did that was a new addition, the idea that Jigen actually attacks another Jonin and has a little bit of a one-on-one with Konohamaru. Of course, Konohamaru doesn't put up much of a fight. They gave him at least a little moment. He got a taijutsu sequence, but it was never going to do anything. This was not a fight Konohamaru was going to win. And as much as, like, I'm definitely part of the group of fans who's kind of like, please give Konohamaru a win at some point, please. I want to see more of him in action and show the potential that I think we all think he has. This wasn't the moment to do that with this character, and that's fine. It was nice, I suppose, just that we got to see him in a scene like this. That was ultimately what was needed. While all of this is happening, of course, in the episode, you do have the idea that, like, they sense Jigen is coming because the karma marks for Boruto and Kawaki begin to sort of like act up. Like Boruto nearly like kills himself falling off a tree because for just a split second it like sort of shuts down like what he's doing, and he just like hesitates for a moment. It's like that's never happened before. And then Kawaki is obviously like struggling in the house. So that was cool. So you see Mitsuki and Boruto make their way to the house. You also see Sarada making her way to the house, and this is where some of the alterations sort of came in terms of the scene where in the anime where Sarada goes to Ino's shop to pick up the flowers for Sakura. In the manga, the way that actually plays out is that Sarada just happens to go to the shop and find Sakura there getting flowers, and that like it's an Ino and Sakura conversation. As, you know, Ino is basically saying roughly what she says to Sarada in this episode about Sakura, but to Sakura. And then in the manga, she doesn't buy flowers for Kawaki, I guess. Again, Sarada didn't say she was buying the flowers for him, but I guess we're meant to interpret it that what Ino says of like, oh, are you buying those flowers for Kawaki, is actually the truth. Now, how much do you read into the idea that it's Sarada buying flowers for Kawaki? I'm not really sure, because we don't obviously get to really see the result of that. But that is the reasoning for why Sarada is making her way to Naruto's house. So everyone is on the way there. So even though Naruto is now missing, all of the main younger characters are going to be in sort of the same area. So that's sort of the setup that we have outside of just the big fight. So, you know, back to the fight, we do get the idea that it seems like Jigen just is stronger here. Kawaki is very worried, even though he's like acknowledged before that like Naruto is roughly the same level as Jigen. I suppose seeing it up close, he sort of realizes that like, oh, this is not going to go well. And part of that is obviously because Naruto can't go all out in the village because he wouldn't want to destroy the village himself just defending. So that's part of why Naruto gets sort of kicked around so much here, and that it's not much of a fight, is that Jigen has the advantage because he doesn't mind collateral damage in this situation, whereas Naruto does. So that's not too much of a problem. Another change they did make is that it's in the manga, the idea that Kawaki is willing to give himself up to sort of save Naruto. The idea that, like, if I go with you, will you leave him be? And Jigen's actually like, yeah, sure, that's fine. Once you cooperate, that's perfectly fine. And Naruto gets like annoyed and is like, no, that's not how this is going to go down. And in the manga, that happens in response to just basically Naruto and Jigen about to square off. In the anime, they add in this new scene where Jigen's actually like got his hand up and is preparing some massive attack that is like potentially the heights of his power. That Kashin Koji notes is like, you're not going to use that here. And I'm not even sure like what this attack necessarily is, because from the manga, I know what Jigen's powers are, but I'm not entirely sure what that was meant to be. So unless it's just some general like energy-based karma attack, sort of like Jigen's equivalent of the kind of beam attack that Kawaki uses, just obviously he's going to use it like 10 times more powerful. I'm guessing it's just something like that, where like, no, that's when Kawaki steps out. I like that as just a clearer cut moment of like him seeing this charged attack of like, you won't be able to handle this. I need to kind of give myself up to kind of fix this. But the main like takeaways here are obviously that Jigen really does note Kawaki's determination, and just that idea that he really has lost the trust of Kawaki, and that Naruto now has it fully. That any sense of that sort of, you know, fake relationship of like, I'm your new father, is completely gone from the two of them. And you can tell that there's an aspect of frustration on Jigen's part that like this is completely gone, that Naruto has really, you know, turned Kawaki away from him. Now obviously that's a case of Jigen not realizing that it's his own treatment of Kawaki that's already done that, and Naruto just being kind to Kawaki has gained that trust. That's what the villain, of course, isn't going to understand necessarily, but he can see that he no longer really has a control over Kawaki, because Kawaki has sort of more faith and care for, you know, Lord Seventh than anything. But it also creates this dynamic where Jigen now realizes, oh, I can get Kawaki to do things by threatening Naruto. So that's the other situation here. And what's interesting about the fight, the way, you know, what we see of it so far, when they're transported to the different dimension, Jigen's plan initially is to just leave Naruto in a different dimension, aware that Naruto doesn't have an ability himself to switch between dimensions. But of course, before Jigen leaves, Sasuke arrives on the scene. So obviously Sasuke is aware that Jigen is kind of switching place to place, so he tracks like Naruto's chakra signature and ends up in the same spot. Very cool setup for like, okay, next episode it's all going to go down. Naruto and Sasuke versus Jigen. This is going to be, you know, the first time in a while we've had sort of an equivalent fight to the Momoshiki fight, because again, Jigen's powers are Otsutsuki based, even though we're not fully sure about the exact specifics. It's something related to Otsutsuki powers. So this is going to be huge, impactful. We see from the preview, we're going to get to see like Naruto and Sasuke use a bunch of jutsu, which is really cool. We have had a decent amount of fights in a row where we maybe haven't seen as much jutsu used as maybe we should have. So seeing Naruto go all out is going to be kind of impactful after he basically didn't use any of his skills against Delta because of the way that fight was sort of structured. So let's go back and cover the most obvious sort of missing scene that the anime didn't have that the manga does have. So, like I said, the one of the main changes here is just that the anime doesn't include Sakura in this episode. And it's more of Sarada completely replaces everything that like Sakura is involved with in this episode. Sarada goes to the flower shop, but Sakura is actually there in the manga. Now, one of the things that happens here is that Sarada asks her mother about, there's something I want to ask you. Your forehead mark. Tell me about mitotic regeneration jutsu. And so Sakura explains, in short, it's a jutsu where in an emergency you can pull out incredible power by releasing all of the chakra you've been storing in the mark bit by bit every day. Lord Seven told me that part already. What's curious is that the mitotic regeneration mark looks similar to karma. So I was wondering if they might be related somehow. And Sakura's just like, according to Master Tsunade, Lord Fifth that is, it's a jutsu that's existed for a really long time, from the age of the Sage of the Six Paths. And we sort of move away from it after that point. Like I said, the manga never comes back to this plot point of like Sarada having an interest in the 100 healings mark, the mitotic regeneration jutsu, and its connection to karma. So the way they seem to be going with this is that they were maybe building up some sort of a thing where that mark was going to be revealed to, I guess, have like Otsutsuki origins in some way and be more really interlinked to all of that stuff. But they more seem to be going now with like, okay, that was a little bit of a mistake, the connection we were trying to make there. So instead, let's just leave it there, and the connection that Sarada was trying to make was literally just that they are two abilities that have a mark at the core of them. And that's really about it. We'll see if they come back to it and explain anything. Obviously, there's a sense for like going into the future. You can picture sort of where Boruto is going to get his powers from, like his enhanced powers from. Sarada, of course, has the whole Sharingan progression that you can go through, but will she also go through the same like progression in terms of her mother's abilities? Like, will she get that mark at some point, and they might do something more based off that connection, and they're just holding off on it for now? Or are we just viewing it as, it's probably a drop plot point, but we'll see what they do with it. It is interesting in that they just left it out here. They just didn't have this in there. Like, they didn't want to do this. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. Whereas, if it was just, like, really just inconsequential, why not just include it there as a brief, like, just a character noting something based on a visual similarity? Now, this is where we get into the idea of, speculation is very heavy within the fandom, of course. Saying those lines of dialogue, I think, would probably have people going too far down a rabbit hole trying to figure it out, when the connection probably isn't as strong as they're making it out to be in this initial moment. So that's really all there is there. I suppose the final thing to cover is just we got to see, like Denki, Iwabe, Metal again. That was cool, like first time in a while. And they did address the whole idea of like, oh, Iwabe and Kawaki have actually met, and they're quite similar. And it basically got across that like, oh, unfortunately, yes, I guess Iwabe is just a sort of like discount Kawaki, isn't he? That's unfortunate. But, it'll be interesting to see if we get any more scenes with them. But like that was just a kind of funny like, oh yeah, everyone was kind of waiting to see these two interact, and it's like, okay, yeah, there's a similarity. They're both sort of like rude to a degree. Like that was Iwabe when he was first introduced, effectively, and here's Kawaki now. So just a fun little thing there. But I think that's more or less everything I wanted to talk about. Like, obviously, the hype is really building up for next week. Will this be one of the top 2-3 episodes of Boruto, or is this just going to be a slightly better animation than usual episode? It's interesting because we're in a section of the manga where a ton of big stuff is now going to happen in a row, in the sense that the Delta fight wasn't that long ago, and they didn't go all out on that, rightfully so. This is a pretty major fight. Like, it's the main villain fighting the most powerful hero characters. Like, this is huge. But there's so much other stuff that has to come as well. So and in a relatively short period of time. So can they have high quality animation for this and also do high quality animation for the next fight and the next fight, given how sort of like boom 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 a lot of this is going to be? I'm wondering how much of a break there's going to be. Does that mean that because of just the close proximity of all of this, we're only going to get like 3 really good but not like outstanding fights, or have they been really holding off, aware that they've probably got about like 3-4 high quality episodes that they need to do, and they're going to go out all out on all of them? That's going to be kind of interesting to see. But like I said, this was a solid setup episode. I think the main thing I can say in praise is just that I like that they went a little bit further than just the one chapter. They went a little bit into the next chapter and just got all of the setup out of the way. So the next episode can sort of be the best that it can be. Like, we're going to really quickly like get through the chapters here that cover this fight, because fights are covered very quickly in animation. So I'm interested to see what they add in, which sections of the fight they're super accurate with, that sort of thing. But they're my thoughts on this episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.